Hey, what's up? It's me, Doc, from SampleKings.com. And I want to talk about a video I did recently, last month, about the upcoming MPC coming out. And I got a lot of responses from people about what's it going to be like, and I was too heavy. I was saying it's going to be lighter, and it said, I like it heavy and stuff like that. But the number one response is about RAM, and about wanting more RAM and saying they need more RAM logged in. And guys are talking about RAM like they knew what they were talking about. Some guys didn't, some guys did. So in this video, I want to explain everything about RAM and how it works in an MPC. And I'm also going to talk about the problems with and why the MP3s don't work. So the MPCX, the MPC1, the MPC Live, the MPC Live 2, and the Akai Force all contain 2 gigabytes of RAM. Now, RAM is something that all computers use, not just your machines. Like my Mac runs a Mac, my PC could be Windows, it runs Windows, our PC can run Linux, right? And these are operating systems on these computers that allow you to work with it. And so on an MPC, it has Linux. And then it also has the MPC software as well, right? So the RAM has to manage the operating system, which is Linux, and also the MPC software, which is MPC 2.0 application itself. Any leftover RAM can be used in your project to dynamically store all your samples, audio tracks, programs, sequences, undos, placement of samples, where they're supposed to go, what happens with the effect here, all that stuff is stored in there, and it's using up RAM. Now you gotta remember, we're not talking about disk storage here, right? RAM is just a dynamic memory used by the MPC to physically hold your current project. Now, when you sample or load audio into your MPC, it is stored as a 32-bit floating point audio file, which is the best or more accurate format for the MPC software to work with. It does not matter if the audio file, let's say, is 24-bit wave or 16-bit wave, or even an MP3 compressed file. It all gets converted to 32-bit WAV files within your project. Now, 32-bit audio takes up twice the memory of an equivalent 16-bit version of the same audio, and 50% more memory than the equivalent 24-bit file. So that audio file you record or the sample you pull in, they're all using memory from the RAM. Now, once audio is loaded into your MPC memory as 32-bit floating point WAV files, the amount of actual RAM taken up by the audio is dependent upon the length for one, also whether it's stereo or mono, and the sample rate, in this case probably 44.1. So let's consider this. We're going to have 2 files. It's going to be a drum break. They're going to be 10 seconds long in stereo, all right? One file is going to be 24-bit wave. The other one will be 16-bit wave. And they're both going to be 44.1 kilohertz. Now, when you store these files on your disk, the 24-bit version will take up 2.65 megabytes of space, right? The 16-bit version will take up 1.76 megabytes of space. But when you load these 2 files into your MPC memory, they both convert to a 32-bit floating point audio. And at this point, both files are identical and will each take up the same amount of system RAM, which will be about 3.58 megabytes of RAM. Now I want to address the MP3 file and how it works in MPC. So recently there was an update for the MPC software, which was MPC 2.11.7.39. That came out. I think guys having problems with their MP3 files, they kept saying, even before that a little bit. And so let's talk about how this works in the MPC. Let's say, for example, we have a file that's a 500 megabyte file of 24-bit, and it's 44.1 WAV file. That represents about 31 minutes of stereo. And we have another file. This is going to be a 500 megabyte, 16-bit audio, and it's going to represent about 47 minutes of stereo audio, about 30 some odd % longer. Now, depending on the compression rate of a 500 megabyte MP3 audio file, that could represent about 5 hours of stereo audio. So while you could easily load an you could easily load a 500 megabyte WAV file into a blank project, there is no way the MPC can load in a typical 500 megabyte MP3 file, as once the MP3 file is converted to 32-bit float, it's going to be about 6 gigabytes of space. That's crazy. It's not going to fit inside that RAM. So be aware of that. So how much memory is available for us, right? You want to know, can we go further and beyond? And the real truth is that Akai states that the MPC firmware will use up around 700 megabytes, 600 to 700, but we'll say 700 megabytes of the installed RAM. And this means we got about 1,300 megabytes of RAM available for us. Now, this is good for samples, taking in audio files, also for project files. It's good for sequences. It's good for programs and effects. Now, this affects the MPC Live, the MPC Live 2, the Mpc'S, the MPC 1, and the Akai Force. So it should be pretty good. Now, the MPC Key 61 has 4 gigabytes of RAM, and the next MPCs will have 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now, in their situation, with the MPC 2, the MPC Key 61 will have 3,300 megabytes of RAM available for samples, projects, project files, sequences, programs, effects, I'm talking about etc., all that stuff. That's a lot more RAM available to use. And so when the new MPCs come out, they'll be even better. Now, the only problem that might happen for some people will be the new MPC 3.0 will probably come out this year. You got to realize the MPC 2 came out with the MPC'S, and that was in 2017. And here we are about 6 years later, and this is the 35th anniversary of the MPC. They will probably put out MPC 3.0.